Good evening and welcome to the May 8th, 2023 Finance and Facilities Committee meeting of the School District of Haverford Township. This meeting is being recorded for people's later viewing on our website. Let's begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have 3 items on tonight's agenda, and I will turn it over to Mr. Bob Cochran as our business manager to walk us through them.
Thank you and good evening. The first item on the agenda is a follow-up to the April 27th regular board meeting where we saw a preliminary budget presented. Tonight, we have some adjustments to that budget, refinements that have been put into place over the last week or so, and present it as the proposed final budget with the intent that the board approve it as the proposed final budget on May 11th at the regular meeting in 3 nights. And we'll go through what that means in a moment. Do you have a PowerPoint presentation there if you want to start that? So, no, that's the wrong PowerPoint presentation. There should be one dated May 8th.
No.
I'm sorry, that is the one I got an email from Ms. Deacon about.
Okay.
I
I
did
can
send
get
it to
another
you.
one.
Yeah, resend it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep, I can resend it to you.
Here it is, I just found it.
You got it,
There
okay.
were 2 sent, I downloaded
There were
the
2,
wrong one.
yeah.
Okay.
Apologies.
No
Okay.
problem.
All right.
We're just glad to have you here, Chris.
Absolutely.
This is an easy fix.
Ta-da,
That looks good.
thank you.
There it is.
So again, this is the proposed final budget. Again, the budget is driven by the goals of the district, with underlying all of this, the primary focus being the education of the young men and women in this community, the students that we have with us tonight, and Chris, our sound guy and video guy. So as we look at it, again, there are 3 primary components: the revenues, the expenditures, and then the fund balance, or what we have as a reserve for the district. Looking at the revenues, we saw this, the numbers have been adjusted slightly as we got better data from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, as we got better data from the federal government, as well as refined calculations of local information. The bulk of the funding for the school district comes from the real estate taxes. 75% of the total resources that are available for education in this community are driven by this. 4.84%, not quite 5%, is brought to us by other local revenue sources. This includes earned income, or interest income, excuse my slip there, interest income, real estate transfer taxes. Anytime a property is sold, there is a tax levied on that, and 0.5% of the sale value is provided to the school district. Delinquent taxes that are collected, that is the real estate taxes that have not been received as current or at discount and are filed with the county. Those delinquent taxes are included in this, as well as a few other smaller items. Just shy of 20% is provided in state subsidies. Part of these subsidies are basic education subsidies, special education subsidies, transportation reimbursements based on ridership. There are subsidies for debt payments. There are subsidies for 50% of the FICA and retirement contributions that the district has to make on behalf of its employees, and the Commonwealth shares that. We upfront the money. I go back to a day when we paid our half, they paid their half. They now have us upfronting all the money, and then they pay us after the fact for their share. And then just shy of 0.9% is federal grants. This is Title I, Title II, Title IV, some what is known as ESSER money, elementary and secondary school emergency relief that came out under the COVID years. And some of that is still within these federal grants. This totals $146,086,810 and is then used to fund the education in the system. Just shy of 59% of the dollars that are spent on direct instruction with the students. This includes regular education, special education, adult education through the Delaware County Community College, vocational education, and it is direct to the students. This figure of 58% is very much on line with what the state norm and average is for the portion spent in instruction. Support services, which then do provide a direct support to that education, which include nursing services, transportation services, buildings maintenance and grounds maintenance services. So, if you will, cleaning the buildings and getting the students here in the first place, making sure that the health needs are met. Even something as mundane as the business office is in here because we need to pay the staff and process the invoices and bills. So this support represents another 28%. So you can see we're pushing 80% in instruction and support. For Haverford, we've got 9.64% represented as debt service. These are funds that have been borrowed in the past and as recent as this most current month that are used to build, renovate, and in major considerations, maintain the systems of our buildings and our facilities. Replacing major systems, doing upgrades, roof replacements, etc. That is 9.64. Again, the norm here is in the 10% range, plus or minus 1% looking across the Commonwealth. Non-instructional is the actual special or athletics, education, and clubs, items of that nature. And this represents 1.2% of the total budget. This year, we're looking at doing a transfer of 1.44%. This is a little over $2 million. The intent of this transfer is to take some of the fund balance that has been accumulated in prior years and set it aside into the capital projects fund so that we can do the summer maintenance projects that were discussed, I believe, back in March at the Finance and Facilities Committee meeting, and effect those and get those behind us. We will have then other projects for future years as well. And then we set aside just over 0.5% in what's known as budgetary reserve. The reality is, with all of this spending, which is $148 million too, including this $2 million piece in there, with all of that spending, nobody's crystal ball works perfectly. We can't get them all 100% accurate, looking a year and a quarter down the line. So we have, in this case, an $800,000 budgetary reserve that allows us, in the event that we have a shortfall in the revenue, something that the state has said this will be a subsidy, but then at the last minute they pull that, so we're not able to take advantage of it, or we have an expenditure that is higher or comes in that we did not anticipate. And that is the entire intent of budgetary reserve. And being just over 0.5% is a very slim margin on a $146 to $148 million budget. It's a very narrow margin in my years in this industry. Oh, it's going the wrong way. There we go. Another way to look at the budget, instead of looking at what is referred to as the functions, is to look at the objects. That is, salaries, benefits, the nature of what the spend is for. 46% is salaries. This is professional staff, teachers, this is administrators, this is custodial staff, this is school bus drivers. This is the paraprofessionals or the instructional assistants. The benefits then associated with those, you can see that we're in excess of 70% here. As we look at the combined of those two, pushing 73% in total, between the two of them, very much personnel driven. The vast majority of this is held up, or controlled, I should say, by contractual agreements with these employees, either formal collective bargaining agreements or meet and discuss agreements. So the obligations, there's not much in these two chunks of the pie, almost 73%, that is discretionary. It is driven by contractual agreements that have been made by the school board over the past.
And can you speak to the PSERS element of that? Because that is also not at our discretion.
Absolutely, yes. Within the benefits, there are certain benefits that I've always referred to as mandatory benefits. Those include the FICA, which is in here, and 100% of it is in here. Just as I mentioned, there is a subsidy in the state revenue. 100% of the payment that we have to make for FICA is in here, as well as 100% of what has to be paid to the retirement system, which is determined by the state and dictated to the school districts. We don't have an option of whether our employees participate or not. We do not have an option on how much they contribute or we contribute to that system. There are certain ranges within which the employees can elect, but the district has no election, and our contribution has been in the 34 to 36% range in the last 3 years. It has risen sharply over the 2000 teens, and is capped out here in the 35% range. Next year, we're looking at a 34% of the total salary contribution, and that is projected in years future to go up to the 36, 37 range based on the Independent Fiscal Office in Harrisburg. How accurate that will be, time will tell. So we have a lot in here that this school board doesn't have much control over at all. The purchase services include services for natural gas, electricity, the fuels for the school buses. This includes maintenance services for equipment on a regular basis, not the major maintenance that I talked about that would be funded through a capital project or a capital bond issue. But in this case, this is the day-to-day preventive maintenance issues, immediate needs, maintenance issues of systems, as well as leasing of equipment such as the photocopiers that are used in all of the facilities in the district, and that is all within this purchase services. We also have some special ed purchase services here. IU services are included within this 11.67%. And those IU services, some of them are dictated by the IEPs with the students, some of them are dictated beyond the IEP based on settlements with families and parents. So again, there's a good chunk of this that, again, the district has little discretion over, such as the utilities and some of those special needs services. Within supplies and equipment, 3.65%. That's where we're looking at the paper supplies, pencils, manipulatives in the classrooms, puzzles, books, games, things of that nature. Textbooks are included in this when we have new adoptions or have to get replacement textbooks because certain textbooks have been damaged beyond being able to be continued to be used. So we have that within the supplies and equipment. The equipment component of this is small equipment, individual printer replacements, small items within, furnishings as needed, chairs, etc. Again, as you can see, less than 4% of the total budget. This component is primarily made up of the principal and the interest on the debt service. But then, unlike the prior picture that we saw, where we saw 9.64, this is at 9.72. That difference of 0.08% is then fees and memberships for staff, for administrators, and for the school board as an associate, or as an entity. So a small component of it, but again, primarily the principal and the interest that has been used to construct or renovate facilities through the years. So you can see these four components rather, the principal and interest, fees, purchase services, benefits, and salaries. Not a whole lot of that is there a lot of discretion with. That leaves us with this 3.64% and then the budgetary reserve and the transfers. And the transfers, the intent of this transfer is to keep the buildings maintained, to eliminate deferred maintenance, which gets us into a situation where a building or a facility gets beyond the need or the ability to repair it currently, and we end up having to do a major renovation. So to prevent that, you keep up with your maintenance on a routine basis. And then again, our budgetary reserve. Two different ways of looking at this. Again, the functions by the nature of it, and then the object, the purpose, specific salaries, benefits, etc. Again, we're looking at $148,211,810 in the budget. Bless you. As we look at that breakdown, operating revenues, $146,086,810. That is an increase over the prior year of 5.77%. Part of that is made up of a millage increase, part of that is made up of an increase in the underlying assessed value of all the taxable properties in the community. Part of that is made up of increases in subsidies from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Looking at the operating component of the expenditures, which excludes the fund transfers, we have an identical amount of $146,086,810. Again, an increase of 5.77%, which gives us an operating increase or deficit of 0, and then taking into account the transfer out for capital purposes of $2,125,000. This budget overall reflects a deficit of $2,125,000. To make this happen, we are limited in our tax increase by Act 1 of 2006. The Act 1 index this year, which is established by the Commonwealth and dictated to us generally in the September timeframe a year ahead, is 4.10 this year. The actual tax increase year over year from 17.688 to 18.16484 is 2.72%. To the average taxpayer, 23-24 over 22-23, with a $366,400 home assessment, it's $176 for the year. Again, as we look then at this $2,125,000 deficit in the overall budget, this is how it will break down. Beginning fund balance, we have committed for capital purposes, an estimate of $14,650,000. We have an unassigned fund balance estimate of $11,049,000, which gives us a total of $25,007,000. As we take the $2,125,000 out of it, that leaves us with $23,584,000. Breaking that down between our unassigned fund balance, which cannot exceed 8%, so we're going to peg that right at 8%, we get $11,856,944. The balance then goes into our committed for capital projects of $11,727,328. So this is available for future years then, estimated, at the end of the 23-24 fiscal year. Again, to fund additional capital projects, as we are seeing here with this fund transfer out. And that'll be discussions that is totally based on future year budgets, and no commitment can be made to it other than we have set it aside and said this is the purpose of it. Looking at that millage increase of 2.72 on an Act 1 index of 4.1, and we look back at a history of 6 years, the Act 1 index has fluctuated, and you can see it's beginning to grow a little bit, but 2.5, 2.4, 2.3, 2.6, and in those years, again, Haverford stuck pretty close to the Act 1 index, a little higher in 2021. I would imagine this was by the way of use of exceptions.
Yes.
Exception dollars that were allotted or allowed by the state. 21-22, we put NA because that was the reassessment year. And to go back and calculate, well, what did that really mean? For some taxpayers, it was higher because of the change that the county assessment board put on their assessment, and for others, it might have been lower. A lot of that had little to do with what the district's millage rate was. The district just had to recalculate and recalibrate its millage to the new assessment system. As we look then at 22-23 and 23-24, you can see these 2 years have been below the Act 1 index by a fair portion, especially the current year. So trying to keep it within a realistic balance between the needs of the educational system and the needs of the taxpayers. So as we look forward, we had our April 27th introduction of the preliminary budget. We've gotten data on the,
Did you miss the slide about the
Miss, yeah.
dollars per student?
you know what? Yeah. It's not in there.
Huh.
Eh. Ooh, and that tree came back. I didn't put that tree back. Okay. We have a slide missing. We will locate it. But in the meantime, let's talk about where we go going forward. We do have the data to calculate the homestead farmstead exclusion for those who qualify. There are 12,302 properties in Haverford Township that qualify for the homestead exclusion. This would exclude $11,865 of an eligible property's assessed value, which would equate to a $215.57 reduction to their tax bill. That will be approved as part of the June 15th board actions. Tonight, we're talking about the proposed final budget on May 8th, and we're looking at May 11th for board action on this document. This is an approval to make this document public, to give an inspection copy of it, and to advertise. We have to have a public inspection copy available no later than May 26th. This should be available May 12th in all reality. So we will easily meet that deadline. June 1st, we will then get an updated tax duplicate, which is the listing of all the taxable properties and their assessed value. We'll get that from the Delaware County Assessment Office and be able to do updated calculations on the real estate tax, et cetera. And that could have an impact one way or the other on the millage. I don't anticipate much of a change, if anything. By June 5th, again, no later than, that's 10 days before the final adoption, we have to have a legal advertisement. That legal advertisement is ready to go pending the final numbers that are approved Thursday night, and will be sent to the paper Friday so that advertisement will be in the paper next week, notifying the public that the public inspection copy is ready, and that the board is planning to adopt this budget on June 15th, for those who haven't come to the board meeting to see what's going on. June 12th, we have another Finance and Facilities Committee meeting. We can look at further refinements based on new data. If the state legislature, Senate or House chime in on the state funding, what impact that would have, if they do chime in, any other changes that we get, as I said, in the assessment notices, et cetera. And from June 12th, we will prepare a final budget, again for board approval, on PDE Form 2028, and that would be approved at June 15th. Between June 15th and June 30th, we go about the business of having the tax bills prepared to be sent out, and then when those, getting these documents, the PDE documents, submitted to Harrisburg so that they are filed appropriately with the Department of Education, and then implementing that budget and beginning the ordering process for the 23-24 school year. Did we find the updated one? There it is. This was asked for by the board at the April 27th meeting. There had been an old one in last year's that just looked at a few years. This is a calculation of what's referred to as the actual instructional expense. It's a state calculated figure per ADM, which stands for average daily membership. And the average daily membership recognizes when a student is enrolled, not that they attended that day, they may have been absent, but if they're enrolled for 192 days in the school year, or 82 days, what is the calendar?
184 days.
184 days, then they are one ADM, because they were one student and they were in the seat for all 184 days. If they unenroll, move out, move in, you get a fraction of that. So it is a year-to-year historical look back at what your enrollment has been, as opposed to a single day's snapshot. So these 2 years are obviously estimates of what those ADMs are, but you can see the spending per ADM is growing, not exponentially, but at a realistic and reasonable rate as we go through inflationary times. And you can see some of these years when we had a huge push with COVID, with technology, and to make sure that everybody had the technology they needed for the distance learning that was going on. So this gives a good reflection of where the district is. And again, this $15,000 range, 14 to 15,000, we are right in the average region, if you will, of the spending per pupil across the Commonwealth.
I'll just note, because maybe those figures are a little small for folks to see, that it starts out in the 2017-18 school year at around $14,000 a student, and then 6 years later, the average cost is $15,000 a student. So I think the chart maybe makes it look a little more dramatic than that, but adding another $1,000 of instructional expense or investment in the education that our students are getting over that 6-8 year period, like you said, in an inflationary period and with some enrollment growth, but yeah, this would pick up the enrollment growth since it's per student, but and also the COVID and other effects that doesn't seem like it doesn't seem as dramatic of an increase as maybe the graph at a glance looks like.
And when I reference enrollment, that as you look at this as a per pupil, as the enrollment grows, that obviously has a different impact on that total budget line, that top line budget. So.
So that concludes the presentation. Are there any questions or comments from the board?
Thanks for the graph. It's helpful.
Yeah.
That was kind of what I was just trying to put it in some context, so that was really helpful.
I took some notes and have some comments as we were going through. One, when you show the, I think slide 6 about the expenditures by object, the benefits and salaries, I think seeing that 75% of our budget is in that category, and then your comments about how much of that is contractually obligated or obligated through state requirements for certain of the benefits and payments. I think that's why we are so careful when the administration proposes a new staff position, because that comes, it might fill an immediate need, but we need to think about the long-term implications of adding that ongoing cost to our budget and having it be picked up with the negotiated or contracted increases and the benefits required. So I think that puts that into context, and I know this budget does recommend some additional positions. That was highlighted at the prior board meeting,
Yes.
but could you maybe recap a few of the positions that would be added to fill needs around the district?
Certainly. We have looked to include what we have termed interventionists at the elementary level, to move two of those positions funded by the general fund. The board has heard a number of times about MTSS and how supporting students in a variety of ways at the elementary level. There's an interventionist in each one of the buildings currently funded with ESSER dollars. And we have seen clearly the value of those positions, and we're looking to have 2 of them move into the general fund, because we know that this upcoming year will be the last year for ESSER funds. Due to enrollment increases, there are additional emotional support teachers, an autistic support teacher, English learner teacher, and a number of teachers for a variety of disciplines at the high school level. We continue to look at the needs at the elementary level, and when we can, we have added an assistant principal. So we're recommending that we move along with that and add an assistant principal that could be shared between two of the buildings. In addition, given our growing needs with not just enrollment, but growing needs in terms of the way activities and use of our building continues to increase, there's an additional high school security staff, an additional custodian at the high school, an additional maintenance mechanic to manage the HVAC systems that will now exist in all of our buildings. And we are seeking to include a cybersecurity analyst position that can help monitor the activity. I'd mentioned to the board last time, with this position in particular, I think it's important to keep in mind the size of our budget, the number of employees that we have across the district, and not think of it so much of a school as think of it as some kind of like an enterprise, a business that runs, and to have that position in place. And then in an effort to try to meet growing needs, but also not to continue to add staff, we are looking at either some hours where people are part-time. An example of that, like in an attendance office at the high school, that's a part-time position, looking to make that a full-time position. Adding hours at the elementary buildings where there's one support person in the office and giving them some additional hours each day where there can be some more support there. And then in the form of stipends to look at supports for activities, different clubs, activities, athletics at both the high school and the middle school.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
One other thing, Bob, when you were talking about the way we have some things that we have to purchase. We purchase utilities, we purchase
Yes.
healthcare, and I think one of the advantages that's helpful to highlight for the members of the community is, one, we are a large operation, and with that we have some purchasing power. We are also able to work in kind of coordination or through collaboration with other school districts, at the county level for purchasing power. And I understand that and then the school district were able to have a kind of preferred vendor to get advantageous pricing, like agreed upon, that we can select vendors that are through a state system. So could you talk about some of the ways in which that purchasing power, those collaborations help us manage costs and get good prices on things?
Absolutely. And one of the largest is the healthcare trust that Haverford participates with the Delaware County Intermediate Unit and other school districts there to manage and control the healthcare costs. As a matter of fact, this year, one of the things that was mentioned back on April 27th is that we actually have a reduction in the general healthcare costs. There are some minor components that have gone up, but overall, we're looking at about a 3% reduction. And that healthcare trust operation is the driving force with that and participation with that trust. In addition, we participate in some joint purchasing opportunities, both through the Delaware County Intermediate Unit, as well as this year through the Chester County Intermediate Unit. And we will actually be acquiring the propane for the school buses through the Chester County Intermediate Unit's joint purchasing program, because Delaware County did not have that available for propane in that large of a quantity. There are also then state-operated entities. One of them is the CoStars program, which goes through the bidding process and affords school districts, municipalities, counties, authorities, other government entities that are bound by bidding requirements to actually be able to piggyback on the bidding process that has been done through the state level and look at the vendors that are available and pick the one that is most advantageous to the local entity, the school district in our case, and take advantage of that bidding pricing that's already stated and out there for public review. So a lot of the work that is done by our maintenance department, they will get the equipment and the materials through that CoStars program and speeding up the process and affording us the savings of that bidding program. Those are just some of the things that we do. There are other things that our human resources do in recruiting collaboratively with other districts, and many things that we do with other districts that increase that economy of scale.
Thank you. Another area that I wanted to spend just a little more time on is the debt service piece. I appreciate that you saying that our, under like 9.5%, 9.6, 9.7% of our budget for debt service is comfortably in the range that is common across school districts across Pennsylvania. But yeah, I also think it's important to explain why the district borrows money, and that by doing so, for example, Linwood cost roughly $30 million, right? Like if we hadn't borrowed the funds, that would be an incredible shock to, if our budget's $140-some million, to have to write checks out of our operating budget
Yes.
to pay that, the implication for our tax base and how we could have those ups and downs would be really hard to manage. So like a homeowner borrows and has a mortgage payment over 20, 25, 30 years, the school district is also able to borrow funds. I think the next agenda item is talking about the favorable rates and
Yes.
the advantages that the district has in doing that. But could you just, again, talk about the kind of the debt service piece and how districts use that borrowing to help manage
Yes.
the budgets?
Yes, Haverford has, at the beginning of the year, it'll be about $138 million in total borrowing, and that is serviced, that is paid principal and interest through the debt service component of the budget. This is a unique thing for government accounting that is very different from corporate accounting, if any of you have been involved in that. The payment of both principal and interest are recognized as expenditures in government accounting. And in the case of Haverford, we're looking at, as was stated, 9.64% for that debt service principal and interest. The whole concept of borrowing to finance facilities, there are a couple of things that can be done. One is the district can increase taxes and save money over the years to pay for the facility and then pay for it all at once, just as a homeowner could save money for as long as they can to actually make an outright purchase of the home. That's very difficult, and then in some respects, you would say the district has become the bankers for the residents, because we're going to take your money and we're going to hold it until we have enough to buy that new elementary or build it. And then also you have the people who have lived here paying for a building that will be used in the future. When you borrow the money to build that building, now we are saying at this point we're going to borrow the money and we're going to build the building. The residents from this point forward are going to be having to pay that debt service through their share of the millage and the payment of taxes, but they are the ones who have the advantage of that new facility in the school district, which enhances their own property values because of the enhanced educational quality within the system based on the facilities available and the students that are being served, and serving those students in your community to give you a better community in the long run. So by borrowing the money, you're saying to those who are here from that point forward, when the building is constructed or renovated, you will be paying for the advantage of it, not the people that were here before, because we saved all this money. Now, when we do have savings, such as we've seen in the fund balance, having a plan over a 5 to 10 year period to spend that, in this case, that would be about a 5-year period, and that's something that the Buildings and Grounds Supervisor and I have been speaking of, is to have that plan to take care of the smaller things that don't need total renovation to be taken care of. Those preventive maintenance and ongoing maintenance things to keep the district from getting into a deferred maintenance situation. That's the likening of, you put off replacing your roof for years and years and years. You know, you just avoid that section of the front railing on the porch that isn't quite secure and you never lean on it. No, we need to take care of that because we have a responsibility to the public to have sound facilities.
I think it's also important to point out, as far as debt service goes, a lot of that is dependent on our credit rating. And I'm not sure what our credit rating is right now and if you have that information on you, but I want you to speak a little bit to how our credit rating kind of allows us to borrow comfortably and stay within this range.
Yeah, the credit rating is a AA2, and that is the second highest rating you can get. The district's, because of its credit rating, and shall we segue into the next?
Yes.
Okay.
As I was thinking.
I think that was a unanimous polling. It wasn't a vote.
It's a poll.
As we look at the next item that is on the agenda, which is the recent borrowing that we engaged in, we haven't closed on it yet. We will close on it on May 31st. But as we look at the rates, the coupons on the bonds were stated at 5%. In selling the bonds then, the interest rates that were actually realized because of premiums paid by bond buyers to get that 5% coupon, they will realize actual rates that are lower than that. And because we got that money up front, we too will be realizing actual lower rates in essence. The rates ranged from a 2.63% to a 3% on the high end, as you 3.4 for the actual highest, but very favorable rates in this market. And this allows us at very good rates to have these funds to buy the additional 10 propane buses, which should be being manufactured so they can be here for the start of school, to finish the renovations that we are doing with the HVAC systems, the Chatham and Coopertown, and finish out any other projects. Anything that's left over from any of these could then be used along with that 11 million that we're looking at the end of the year to continue that 5-year capital project ongoing. So we have very favorable rates. We don't have the highest bond rating that there is in the Commonwealth. We are higher than the Commonwealth. No surprises there. But there are only a handful, maybe 5 or 6 districts that do have that, and they have gotten significant scrutiny of their fund balances, that unplanned fund balances that they're just sitting on. You don't have excessive fund balances, you don't have low fund balances, you're right in a good spot going forward.
All right. And I think one of the other features of this bond sale was to eliminate a prior issuance that had a floating rate that was hedged by a swap and had some complications there. So now all of the district's debt will be fixed rate, easy to plan going
Yes.
forward for. And I see that, so our PFM is our financial advisor and made a note that in the presentations that they had done, I think they always try to be a little conservative, and so the pricing that you indicated beat what they had proposed or estimated as the carrying cost of the new
Yes.
debt.
And that has been my experience with PFM at other districts, is they've always taken that conservative approach.
And then over-deliver for us, yeah.
Absolutely.
One of the things that was, you asked about the bond rating, and so Moody's does a credit opinion, and I'll just highlight a couple of the things that they said with their credit analysis related to the bond issuance. They noted as credit strength, the district's healthy and improving reserves and liquidity, our trend of growing enrollment, above average resident income levels, the continuing multi-year trend of improving reserves, and characterized our leverage or our borrowing as moderate. I think the report was generally favorable about the management of the district. I think the level of liquidity relative to our revenues, our tax base, the use of the borrowing to invest in capital improvements and new buses was reviewed favorably. They talk about the district's transparency and disclosure is in line with our peers, the satisfactory budget management, solid policy credibility and effectiveness, I think are all good outside assessments of the district's financial management and practices and our financial condition that allows us to consider how we can continue to invest in the facilities, make those investments that will support the educational program for students for years and years to come, and do that by borrowing and, as you said, kind of having those costs be picked up over future years, layered in. When Jamie does his presentation, he shows how the debt is held kind of level, and then as new debt is added, it wraps toward the end to maintain that. And that strategy is well regarded and has afforded us the favorable rates to continue to make those investments.
Yes.
Any other comments or discussion? That was item B of the agenda, the bond sales results.
I was just glad we could get this done, because I was just reading how the Fed's raising interest rates again. So I
Again.
was glad we could get this in there. The timing is, I feel like Jamie's always spot on with his timing. I've been really impressed with that. I guess that's his job, but it's always been to the district's benefit, I think. So I was glad that we had this, kind of finalized before all of that is happening.
I did have one clarifying question. In kind of the material, and it's something I probably should have asked before when Jamie did a presentation, his charts start with 1993 with the interest rate. Does that mean that we are still carrying debt from loans we took out in 93? Okay.
I believe the oldest debt on the books is 2012, maybe? And forgive me that I don't have all of your
Yeah.
debt
You weren't expecting
completely
questions.
memorized.
Yeah, I'm looking at,
or-
a
no,
debt
the-
service requirements, the summary of outstanding indebtedness.
It's
There's
the
one
next
that's
year.
the 2009.
2000
Bonds of 2009. and then
2009 is what was refunded.
That was the
variable
variable rate
debt.
that was refunded, yep.
Yes.
And then the next one's
So
2017.
2017, actually,
So
is
the
oldest
oldest
bond
debt
issue
that we're continuing
that
to
you
hold.
have.
Okay,
Yes.
great, thank you for the clarification.
Yeah. Anything else?
I think we're ready for the next agenda item.
Item C is just a heads up of an item that will be on the public agenda on Thursday for the May 11th board meeting. The council who is advising relative to real estate tax assessment appeals has brought 5 situations to us. These are taxpayer-initiated appeals for residential and commercial properties that they have pressed the appeal, and our legal counsel has met with their legal counsel and come to a settlement agreement so that it avoids going that next step to court where there are significant additional costs involved, et cetera. And we come to a resolution, an amicable resolution with these taxpayers. And there will be 5 of those items on the agenda on Thursday evening with the solicitors or the Assessment Appeal Council's recommendation.
So with that concludes the 3 items that were on our agenda, and now we have time for public comment if there's anyone who would like to speak. Seeing none, the business of this committee is concluded and we're adjourned. Thank you.